If you're expecting me to bow, Your Highness, you hired the wrong pilot. Elias Vance said it without looking up, his voice nearly swallowed by the low mechanical hum of the Asterian's engines. Princess Saelyra stopped halfway through the cockpit hatch. For 3 seconds, neither of them moved. Outside the forward glass, the royal orbital docks curved against the darkness like a silver crown, thousands of lights trembling beneath the blue-white glow of Saelyra. Inside, the air smelled of coolant, warm circuitry, and the bitter coffee sitting forgotten beside Elias's elbow. He was nothing like the pilots her advisors had recommended. No polished uniform, no ceremonial flight pins, no rehearsed smile, just a weathered charcoal jacket, dark hair touched with gray at the temples, and hands moving calmly across the controls as if an alien princess entering his cockpit ranked somewhere below, checking the fuel mixture. Saelyra stepped closer. Her pale turquoise skin caught the instrument glow with an almost metallic shimmer. Most people acknowledge me before insulting royal protocol. Elias finally glanced over. Silver ceremonial fabric framed her narrow shoulders, elegant enough for a throne room and wildly impractical for a courier ship. His expression barely changed. Wasn't an insult. No, just saving us both time. Something dangerously close to amusement touched her eyes. Elias turned back to the console. He had already inspected the Asterian twice, and he disliked what he had found. The ship was beautiful in the way expensive things often were. Sleek hull, whisper-quiet gravity systems, navigation hardware worth more than every vessel he had owned combined. But beauty could hide bad maintenance. One stabilizer was running 6 degrees hotter than its twin. The starboard maneuvering thrusters had been recalibrated recently. Too recently. And someone had accessed the flight control housing before he arrived. He rubbed his thumb across an old burn mark circling his left wrist. A nervous habit he thought he had buried years ago. Saelyra noticed. So did the royal security officer standing behind her. The officer's golden eyes narrowed for half a heartbeat, then moved away. Elias felt it anyway. He always felt when someone looked too carefully. Your references described you as a cargo pilot, Saelyra said. That's what I do. They also describe you as quiet. That's because I'm usually around cargo. This time she actually smiled. It vanished quickly. The destination will be provided after departure. Elias leaned back. There it was. The part of the job that smelled worse than the coffee. A royal passenger. An armed escort. A flight plan nobody wanted written down. He should have walked away. Instead, he listened to the engines breathing beneath his boots, steady and familiar, like some enormous sleeping animal. How dangerous? He asked. Saelyra's gaze shifted toward the stars. It shouldn't be dangerous at all. Elias had survived long enough to distrust that sentence more than any threat. He reached for the ignition controls. Strap in, Princess. Behind them, the docking clamps released with a deep metallic vibration. Saelyra settled into the co-pilot seat. You still haven't asked where we're going. Elias watched the stars widen as the Asterian drifted free of the station. Somewhere in the reflection, his own face looked older than he remembered. Where are we going? He asked. Saelyra waited until the palace lights were shrinking behind them. Then she gave him a destination he had not heard spoken aloud in 11 years. Elias's hand stopped over the controls. Only for a second. But Saelyra saw it. The name Saelyra gave him settled into the cockpit like a sudden drop in temperature. Vesper Reach. Elias kept his hand on the controls until the stiffness left his fingers. 11 years had passed since he had flown anywhere near that region, yet his body remembered before his mind could interfere. The dry taste behind his teeth, the pressure of a harness against his ribs, the strange silence that came after too many voices disappeared from a communications channel. He pushed those memories down and adjusted their departure vector. That is not a diplomatic route, he said. Saelyra studied his profile. It is now. The Asterian cleared Saelyra's traffic boundary, and the vibration beneath their seats softened. As the main drive took over, behind them, the royal world became a blue coin surrounded by orbital lights. Ahead waited open darkness. Elias checked the navigation solution without trusting the automatic system. The official course bent toward Horizon Gate, but Saelyra had requested a deviation through 3 lightly monitored systems before approaching it. That added nearly 14 hours and made no sense for a ceremonial mission. Who knows you are aboard? He asked. My security detail. 2 ministers. My brother. Who knows the destination? Saelyra hesitated. Fewer people. Elias turned his chair toward her. That was not a number. Her expression hardened with the effortless authority of someone raised among people who obeyed first and questioned later. It did not work on him. 4, she said. Including you. Better. Not good. Elias looked toward the royal security officer near the cockpit hatch. Commander Thalen had barely spoken since departure. His polished armor reflected the cabin lights, and his golden eyes remained fixed on the corridor. Professional. Controlled. Elias had known men who could make silence feel reassuring. Thalen's silence felt measured. Saelyra reached beneath the collar of her ceremonial coat and removed a small crystalline cylinder no longer than her thumb. She held it carefully. This is why I hired you. Elias did not touch it. What is it? A diplomatic cipher containing authenticated records from the border systems. Fleet movements. Private agreements. Evidence that someone has been manufacturing incidents between 3 governments. The engine hum suddenly seemed louder. Elias understood the shape of the problem now. Not a princess traveling to negotiations. A princess carrying proof that somebody wanted negotiations to fail. If these records reach Orizon Gate, Saelyra continued, 3 fleets stand down. If they do not, mobilization begins within 72 hours. Elias stared through the windshield. Tiny stars drifted across the glass as the Asterion rotated toward its first jump corridor. He had spent 11 years avoiding uniforms, speeches, and causes large enough to bury ordinary people beneath them. He transported machinery because machinery never asked him to save history. You should have told me before launch. Would you have accepted? No, Saelyra almost smiled. That is why I waited. Elias let out a slow breath. You are difficult cargo. I am not cargo. Everybody is cargo when I am flying. A soft tone sounded from the navigation system. Elias looked toward the instruments, then frowned. Their assigned hyperspace corridor had changed. Not malfunctioned. Changed. Someone had transmitted a priority routing order carrying valid royal authorization. The new coordinates would take the Asterion through an unmonitored sector 12 light-years from the nearest patrol station. Saelyra leaned forward. Did you request that? Elias was already disengaging the automatic navigation. No, Commander Thalen stepped closer. Royal traffic control can alter routes for security reasons. Elias examined the authorization signature. It belonged to an office that should not have known Saelyra was leaving tonight. He felt the old cold awareness returning, quiet and precise. Princess, he said, how much do you trust your palace? Saelyra looked at the cipher in her hand. Before she could answer, 3 unidentified ships changed course in the darkness ahead and began moving directly toward them. The 3 ships did not broadcast identification, and that told Elias more than any threat could have. Legitimate patrols announced themselves. Pirates demanded money. Professionals approached quietly. He pulled the Asterion out of the altered flight corridor and felt the deck tilt beneath his boots as the inertial system compensated. Commander Thalen caught the edge of the hatch. Saelyra remained strapped into the co-pilot seat, the crystalline cipher enclosed in her fist. They are accelerating, she said. I noticed. Elias reduced engine output. Thalen stared at him. Why are you slowing down? Because they expect us to run. The nearest vessel moved across their path, while the other 2 widened their formation. Clean geometry. No wasted motion. Elias watched the pattern develop, and something old stirred beneath 11 years of deliberate forgetting. He knew this. Formation. More importantly, he knew what came next. There is a planet 70,000 miles below us, Elias said. Saelyra glanced toward the navigation instruments. An uninhabited gas giant. Exactly. There is nowhere to land. I am not planning to land. The first ship transmitted a demand for the Asterion to shut down its engines and prepare for boarding. Saelyra reached toward the communications controls. If they are operating under royal authority, surrender may prevent an incident. Elias looked at her. Someone inside your palace redirected us into empty space, and 3 ships were waiting. That is not an incident. A second transmission arrived. This one warning that continued flight would be treated as hostile resistance. Elias ignored it. He angled the Asterion toward the gas giant. Pale amber clouds filled the forward glass. Thalen stepped forward. Pilot, you will obey the princess. Saelyra watched Elias instead. Can you get us away from them? He considered lying. Maybe. That answer seemed to disturb her more than confidence would have. Elias pushed the ship into a steep descent. The Asterion began to shudder as the upper atmosphere caught its hull. Outside, amber became copper, then a boiling field of clouds stretching farther than sight. The pursuing ships followed. Of course they did. They believed they were chasing a civilian pilot. Elias shut down the main drive. The sudden absence of vibration made the cabin unnaturally still. "What did you do?" Thalen demanded. "Made us look helpless." Without thrust, the Asterion dropped deeper. Pressure climbed. Heat crawled across the hull in dull, orange waves. Saelyra gripped her restraints, but kept her voice level. "How far can this ship descend?" "Not this far." Her eyes snapped toward him. Elias counted silently. The pursuers tightened formation, unwilling to lose visual contact inside the clouds. 10 seconds. 7. 4. He restarted the maneuvering thrusters, but left the main drive cold. The Asterion rolled sideways through a violent current, disappearing beneath a layer of electrically charged vapor. Elias waited until the three ships committed to the descent. Then he drove full power through the starboard thrusters. The courier spun nearly backward, using the atmospheric current instead of fighting it. Metal groaned. Saelyra's breath caught. The Asterion shot upward through its own wake, while the pursuers continued downward for several precious seconds. Elias reignited the main drive. The acceleration pressed everyone deep into their seats. Behind them, the gas giant fell away. Two pursuing ships struggled to reverse course. The third did not. It emerged above the clouds almost immediately and matched Elias's escape vector with unsettling precision. His stomach tightened. Whoever was flying that ship had recognized the maneuver before Elias completed it. Then a voice came through the open channel, calm and unmistakably familiar. I wondered how long it would take before the Wraith started flying like himself again. Elias went completely still. For the first time since Saelyra had entered the cockpit, Elias looked afraid. Not startled. Not uncertain. Afraid. The difference lasted less than a second before his face settled into its usual stillness, but she had seen it. Commander Thalen had seen it too. "Who is Wraith?" Saelyra asked. Elias cut the open channel and changed their heading by 12 degrees. "Someone trying to make me answer." He addressed you. "People make mistakes. Not while predicting impossible flight maneuvers." Elias ignored that. The remaining pursuit ship stayed 7 miles behind them, close enough to track, far enough to avoid being trapped by another atmospheric trick. Its pilot was patient. That bothered Elias more than aggression would have. He adjusted the Asterion's cooling system and listened to the uneven pulse of the starboard stabilizer. The maneuver near the gas giant had pushed it harder than he liked. They needed distance, not another fight. "Where did you learn to fly like that?" Saelyra asked. "Freight routes." Thalen gave a humorless sound. "Cargo pilots do not reverse a royal courier inside a gas giant." Elias glanced at him. "Good cargo pilots do." Saelyra leaned closer to the navigation controls. "You knew exactly when those ships would commit to the descent. They were predictable. You knew their formation." Elias said nothing. Silence had protected him for 11 years. Now every quiet second seemed to answer for him. The pursuing vessel suddenly accelerated. Elias reacted before its engines reached full output. He rolled the Asterion beneath the approaching trajectory, cut thrust for 2 seconds, then redirected power into the upper maneuvering ports. The courier slipped sideways through space. Nothing dramatic. No violent turn. Just several hundred feet of separation appearing precisely where it mattered. The other pilot overshot. Saelyra stared at Elias's hands. He had moved before any proximity alarm sounded. "You knew," she whispered. Elias felt the old burn around his wrist itch beneath his sleeve. "I guessed." "No. You remembered. That landed too close." He pushed the Asterion toward a debris field orbiting the gas giant's outer moon. Thousands of fragments drifted there, remnants of mining platforms abandoned decades earlier. The pursuing ship slowed rather than follow immediately. Smart. Elias threaded the courier between broken support beams and frozen equipment housings, never consulting the navigation display for more than a glance. Thalen moved behind him, watching with growing suspicion. Then his attention dropped to Elias's left wrist. During the sharp maneuver, the jacket sleeve had pulled back. The old scar formed a pale ring around the skin, interrupted by 3 narrow marks. Thalen's expression changed. "That is a Vesper flight restraint scar." Elias pulled the sleeve down. It is a burn. I served with officers who carried those. Then ask them about it. Most of them are dead. The cockpit became quiet except for the soft ticking of cooling metal. Saelyra studied Elias, no longer seeing a hired civilian. He could feel the question building behind her eyes. Before she asked it, the communication system received a short, encrypted burst from the pursuing ship. Elias expected another challenge. Instead, it contained coordinates. He recognized them immediately, a point deep inside Vesper reach. Beside the coordinates came a spoken message, only 6 words long. Come home, Wraith. We found them. Elias forgot to breathe. Elias read the coordinates twice, although he had recognized them before the transmission finished. Kestrel Hollow. During the Vesper War, the name had belonged to a narrow evacuation corridor between 2 unstable gravity wells. After the war, navigation authorities erased it from civilian charts. Nothing useful remained there. At least, nothing was supposed to. We are not going, Elias said. Saelyra watched him erase the coordinates from the active navigation queue. You know that place. I know enough. Commander Thalen stepped closer. The pursuing vessel has stopped advancing. Elias checked the sensors. Thalen was right. The unidentified ship hovered beyond the debris field, holding position instead of pressing its advantage. Then another signal appeared, weaker and much closer. A small object drifted among the wreckage less than 3 miles away. Its emergency beacon pulsed irregularly. Saelyra studied the sensor report. Escape pod. Elias narrowed the scan. The pod matched the technology of the attackers. 1 occupant. Life support failing. It could be bait, Thalen said. Probably. Elias changed course. Thalen stared at him. You just refused to follow their coordinates because you suspected a trap. Correct. Now you are flying toward another one. Also correct. Saelyra understood first. There is someone alive inside. Elias guided the Asterian between 2 rotating sections of an old mining frame. Frost coated the wreckage, flashing silver beneath distant starlight. The escape pod tumbled slowly ahead, one maneuvering jet firing without rhythm. Thalen moved toward the controls. We cannot risk the princess for an enemy pilot. Elias caught his wrist before he touched anything. The movement was quiet, almost casual. Do not interfere with my ship. This is a royal vessel. Then you should have hired a royal pilot. Saelyra raised one hand. Thalen stepped back. Elias released him and opened the cargo airlock remotely. The Asterian matched the pod's rotation, inch by inch, until the recovery field drew it inside. A heavy vibration traveled through the deck as the outer doors sealed. You should remain here, Elias told Saelyra. That was not a request, was it? No. He found the pilot unconscious inside the pod, wearing the same unmarked flight gear used by their pursuers. No visible weapons. No identification. Elias checked the pilot's breathing, connected a portable oxygen unit, and stabilized the damaged suit seals. Thalen watched from the doorway with open disapproval. Why, he asked. Elias kept working. Because he needs help. He tried to capture us. He cannot do that from the floor. Saelyra had ignored Elias and followed them into the cargo bay. Her gaze rested on him with an expression he could not read. You risked our mission for someone who may have been sent to stop it. Elias secured the oxygen line. If I only help people after deciding whether they deserve it, that is not much of a principle. The pilot stirred. His eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then widened when they found Elias. He tried to speak. Elias leaned closer. Easy. You are safe. The stranger swallowed against the dry air. Wraith. Elias stiffened. The pilot reached weakly toward his flight jacket and pulled free a small metal token, blackened with age. Elias recognized the emblem stamped into it. His old squadron. Where did you get that? The pilot looked past him toward Saelyra, fear replacing exhaustion. The princess cannot reach Orison Gate, he whispered. The cipher is not evidence. His breathing steadied enough for one final sentence. It is the key that starts the war. The pilot's warning followed Elias back to the cockpit and stayed there, heavier than the engine noise. Saelyra placed the crystalline cipher on the narrow table between the seats, but did not release it immediately. Under the cabin lights, faint colors moved through its transparent core like trapped lightning. My father's intelligence council authenticated this device, she said. 3 separate offices confirmed the records. Elias lowered the Asterian's speed and redirected them away from the pursuit ship, which still held beyond the debris field. Then either your pilot is lying, or somebody fooled 3 offices. There is another possibility. They were not fooled. Saelyra's turquoise fingers tightened around the cylinder. Elias looked at her. She had carried herself like royalty since boarding, every movement controlled, every answer measured. Now he saw something smaller beneath the title. Not weakness. Isolation. A woman realizing that the walls protecting her might also be the walls hiding the truth. When did you receive it? He asked. 9 days ago. My brother delivered it personally. Elias said nothing. She noticed. You suspect him. I suspect everyone who knew enough to put 3 ships in our path. Commander Thalen remained near the cockpit hatch. Including me? Especially you. Thalen's jaw tightened, but Saelyra raised a hand before he could answer. Enough. We need facts. Elias appreciated that. Facts had edges. Fear did not. An hour later, the Asterian drifted beyond the gas giant's moon while its damaged stabilizer cooled. Elias prepared 3 emergency meals in the galley, if warm nutrient paste and hard bread deserved the word meal. Saelyra joined him without her ceremonial coat, wearing the simple, dark travel layer beneath it. She examined the gray paste. Humans eat this voluntarily? Only after making several poor life choices. She tasted it and stared at him with quiet betrayal. Your species has crossed half the galaxy. We needed somewhere better to eat. A brief laugh escaped her. Elias almost smiled. Then the galley timer chimed. His spoon stopped halfway to his mouth. The sound was ordinary, soft, harmless. His body disagreed. His shoulders locked. Air caught behind his ribs. For one impossible instant, the warm galley vanished beneath cold blue emergency lighting and overlapping voices from another lifetime. He heard names he had trained himself not to remember before sleeping. Saelyra reached toward the timer and silenced it. The room returned. Elias set the spoon down carefully. That sound means something to you, she said. It used to. She did not ask more. That restraint surprised him. Instead, she slid his untouched water across the table. He drank. The gesture was so simple that it unsettled him more than questions would have. From the medical compartment, the rescued pilot called weakly for Elias. They found him sitting upright, oxygen line still attached. He looked at the cipher in Saelyra's hand and shook his head. You cannot examine it with royal systems. The moment you do, it reports its location. Saelyra went still. How do you know? The pilot opened his palm. Beneath the old squadron token rested a tiny mechanical key. Because the man who built that cipher sent me to find Wraith. Elias recognized the machining marks before he recognized the implication. Human military work. Vesper era. The pilot looked directly at him. He is alive, Elias. Elias felt the temperature leave the room. Who? The pilot answered with a name Elias had watched disappear from his squadron roster 11 years ago. Captain Jonah Mercer. The name struck Elias harder than the warning tone had. He stood beside the medical bunk without moving, staring at the rescued pilot as if stillness could make the words less real. Jonah had commanded Wraith Squadron during the final year of the Vesper War. Elias remembered his terrible coffee, his habit of tapping twice on a cockpit canopy before every launch, and the last transmission that had dissolved into static over Kestrel Hollow. I watched his ship disappear, Elias said. Then you watched what someone wanted you to see, the pilot replied. Elias took the mechanical key from his palm. It was cold, heavier than its size suggested, with a worn groove along one edge. Jonah used to machine little tools during long deployments because he claimed human hands needed something useful to do when the universe became unreasonable. Elias hated how perfectly that memory fit. Saelyra remained silent until they returned to the cockpit. Then she placed the cipher inside a shielded storage compartment rather than against the royal systems. We cannot continue toward Orizon Gate without knowing what we are carrying. Agreed. And the only person who may know is inside Vesper Reach. Elias looked through the forward glass. Also agreed. Saelyra blinked. I expected an argument. I already lost that argument 11 years ago. He entered a course manually. The Asterian turned away from every established transit lane and toward a region most civilian captains avoided even in daylight cycles. Vesper Reach had never truly recovered from the war. Navigation relays remained sparse. Gravity distortions shifted without warning, and thousands of abandoned vessels still move through the dark on trajectories set by battles nobody alive wanted to remember. Commander Thalen studied the route. There is no map passage through that field. Elias increased power. There is. The chart says otherwise. The chart was written by people who wanted to live. 6 hours later, the first wreck appeared. A cruiser nearly a mile long drifted beneath them, its hull pale under distant starlight. Then came another, and another. Broken carriers, medical transports, supply ships, alien frigates, human destroyers. No flames. No battle. Only silent metal turning through space. Saelyra stopped asking how Elias knew where to steer. He slipped between wrecks before the sensors fully identified them, changing altitude near invisible gravity pockets and avoiding corridors that looked perfectly safe. 3 degrees starboard, he murmured once. Saelyra checked the instruments. There is nothing there. There used to be mines. Used to be. Some machines are patient. She watched him for several seconds. You remember every mile. Elias kept his eyes forward. Not every mile. A shattered communications mast passed close enough for its shadow to sweep across the cockpit. His fingers tightened around the controls. Just the ones where somebody did not come home. Saelyra looked away, granting him the privacy of silence. Then the Asterian's receiver caught something faint beneath the background noise. Not a distress call. A repeating analog pulse, primitive enough to survive electronic interference. Elias knew the rhythm immediately. 3 short beats, 2 long, 3 short. Wraith Squadron's old rendezvous signal. He followed it deeper into the graveyard until a human carrier emerged from behind a dead moon, dark and apparently abandoned. Saelyra checked its identification registry. That ship was declared destroyed 11 years ago. Elias stared at the carrier's open docking bay. 1 small guidance light blinked from inside. Twice. Pause. Twice. Again. Jonah Mercer's pre-flight habit. Elias felt his pulse in his scarred wrist. Someone aboard was waiting specifically for him. The Asterian crossed the carrier's docking threshold at walking speed. Elias kept one hand on manual control while the guidance light pulsed twice more, leading them toward an intact berth hidden behind layers of dead machinery. No automated greeting welcomed them. No crew appeared. Only the faint vibration of magnetic clamps traveled through the deck when the couriers settled into place. The carrier has atmosphere in several internal sections, Saelyra said. Someone maintained it. Elias unfastened his harness. Stay close. Commander Thalen checked the corridor before they left the ship, while the rescued pilot remained aboard to recover. The carrier smelled exactly wrong for a grave. Warm metal, filtered air, machine lubricant. Beneath it all lingered the dry electrical scent of systems operating at minimal power. Elias remembered these corridors crowded with flight crews and supply carts. Now their footsteps returned from the walls as lonely echoes. Saelyra walked beside him, carrying the shielded cipher container. You served here? For 8 months. You never mentioned that. There are many things I never mention. They reached the old flight operations room. Most equipment was dark, but one isolated console remained connected to an independent power source. Beside it sat a battered flight recorder with human military markings. Elias stopped. He knew that recorder. Wraith Squadron had carried identical units. The mechanical key fit a narrow service port along its side. A motor clicked inside, followed by the software of ancient storage media waking after 11 years. Saelyra leaned closer as recovered mission records began translating into spoken summaries through the console's audio system. Squadron assignments. Launch times. Emergency diversions. Elias listened without moving until the final mission surfaced. His own name came first. Lieutenant Commander Elias Vance. Call sign Wraith. Saelyra slowly turned toward him. The record continued. 12 pilots had launched into Kestrel Hollow during the evacuation. 11 were listed as confirmed lost. Elias alone carried a different classification. Survival status unknown. Location sealed by wartime authority. Thalen stared at him. The official histories say Wraith Squadron was destroyed. They were, Elias said quietly. Saelyra's eyes remained on his face. Except you. Elias looked toward the dark observation window overlooking the empty hangar. Apparently, the recorder advanced into damaged audio. Voices emerged beneath static, fragmented but recognizable. Jonah giving evacuation vectors. Pilots reporting civilian transports. Elias heard his younger self answering from somewhere across 11 years. Faster, sharper, carrying none of the silence he wore now. Then came a command ordering Wraith Squadron to abandon the evacuation corridor and withdraw. Jonah refused. Another voice threatened court-martial. Jonah refused again. Saelyra lowered the cipher container. Your squadron disobeyed orders. We stayed until the transports cleared. How many? Elias swallowed. 43. The recorder produced another file, one that should not have existed. Its date was 3 days after the squadron's reported destruction. Jonah's voice came through clearly. If Elias survived, keep him away from Orizon. They will use what happened here again. Elias stepped toward the console. The recording ended. A hidden compartment beneath the recorder opened with a mechanical snap. Inside rested a second crystalline device, identical in shape to Saelyra's cipher. She placed hers beside it. The two crystals began pulsing in perfect synchronization. Then the carrier's dormant systems awakened around them, and a calm, automated voice announced that the Vesper authorization pair had been reunited. Elias stared at the matching devices as the truth took shape. Saelyra had never been carrying evidence to Orizon Gate. She had been carrying one half of an 11-year-old military command key. The carrier answered the paired crystals by waking systems that had been silent for 11 years. Air moved through forgotten vents. Somewhere beyond the operations room, machinery turned with a slow metallic rhythm. Elias watched old mission archives unlock one layer at a time, each recovered record translated aloud by the carrier rather than displayed for them to read. Orizon Gate appeared again and again in authorization histories tied to the final days of the Vesper War. It was never just a transit station, Elias said. Saelyra stood beside the two crystals, her turquoise face pale beneath the cold cabin lighting. What was it? A command relay. Experimental. It could authenticate orders across multiple fleet networks at once. Phelan's golden eyes narrowed. Enough to control ships? Not directly. Enough to make thousands of captains believe the same order was legitimate. That was worse. Saelyra understood immediately. A weapon did not need to fire if it could convince frightened fleets that someone else had fired first. Elias inserted the mechanical key into the recorder again and searched Jonah's hidden archive. A final testimony surfaced, recorded after Kestrel Hollow. Jonah's tired voice explained that senior officers had attempted to activate Orizon during the evacuation, intending to fabricate coordinated attack orders and force neutral fleets into the war. Wraith Squadron had discovered the plan by accident. Jonah separated the authorization key into two crystals and hid one aboard the carrier. The second disappeared into diplomatic custody. Saelyra stared at the cipher she had trusted for 9 days. My family preserved it. Without knowing what it was, Elias said. Or knowing exactly. Phelan shifted uncomfortably. Saelyra did not defend the palace this time. The archive continued. Elias heard his younger voice arguing with Jonah over the squadron channel. He remembered the moment now. Jonah had ordered him to escort civilian transports away from Kestrel Hollow while the others stayed behind to disable the relay connection. Elias had called it cowardice to leave them. Jonah had called it an order. You were sent away, Saelyra said softly. Elias shook his head. I chose to go. To protect 43 transports. To leave 11 friends behind. The words came out flat because anything more would have cracked something he had spent years holding together. Saelyra stepped closer, but did not touch him. You think surviving means you failed them. Elias looked through the observation window at the graveyard outside. Heroes stay. No, she said. Dead people stay. Survivors carry what happened forward. He finally looked at her. There was no royal authority in her expression now, only certainty. Elias almost argued, but another archive opened. Rescue manifests. 43 civilian transports. More than 18,000 passengers. Human, Valari, and 6 other species. Every vessel had reached safety under the guidance of one escort pilot. Wraith. Elias closed his eyes. He had never learned the number. He had never wanted to. The carrier suddenly announced an incoming encrypted transmission. The signal originated less than 500 miles away, hidden among the wrecks. Elias opened the channel. Static breathed through the room. Then came a voice older than memory, but unmistakable. You always did take the long way home, Elias. Elias gripped the console. Saelyra stopped breathing beside him. Jonah? A quiet laugh crossed 11 lost years. Good to hear you too, kid. Now listen carefully. You have about 9 minutes before the people who sent that princess realize both halves of the key are active. 9 minutes until what? Elias asked. Jonah's answer came through a wash of static. Until Orizon recognizes the paired authorization and begins calling every fleet tied to the old network. Elias looked at the 2 crystals pulsing beside the recorder. Can we stop it? Separate the keys and leave Vesper reach. I will send you a safe vector. Saelyra stepped toward the transmitter. Captain Mercer, who sent me? Silence lasted half a second too long. Princess, your brother authorized the courier mission. Her face hardened. That does not answer my question. No, Jonas said. It does not. The carrier shuddered. Dust lifted from the console seams. Phelan checked his communicator, then froze. Elias saw the change immediately. What is it? Phelan lowered the device. Royal Command Channel. Here. Saelyra asked. That should be impossible. Phelan's golden eyes met hers. Your brother is ordering me to secure the cipher and detain the pilot. Elias felt no surprise. That worried him. And what are you going to do? Phelan stood very still. Then he removed the royal transmitter from his armor and placed it on the floor. Disobey. Saelyra's expression softened for only a moment. A deeper vibration rolled through the carrier. Jonah spoke again. You have 6 minutes. Move. They returned to the Asterion at a run. The rescued pilot was already strapped into the medical station. Elias sealed the docking hatch and powered the engines while Saelyra secured both crystals inside separate shielded containers. The courier pulled free of the dead carrier just as distant lights appeared among the wreckage. Not 3 ships this time. Dozens. Royal signatures, Phelan said. And 2 border fleet groups. Elias guided the Asterion through the graveyard, but the approaching vessels were not chasing them. They were converging toward the same point beyond the dead moon. Orizon Gate. They received the signal, Saelyra said. The keys called them here. Jonah transmitted a route toward an abandoned service corridor. Elias followed it until a second signal interrupted the channel. This one carried royal encryption. Saelyra's brother spoke with perfect calm. He told her to surrender the crystals, promising that no harm would come to anyone aboard. Saelyra listened without answering. Then another voice joined the transmission. A Valari admiral reported that human ships had crossed the restricted boundary. Seconds later, a human commander reported the opposite. Valari vessels were advancing first. Elias understood. They are feeding each fleet different information. Manufacturing the incident, Saelyra said. The same trick Jonah had described from 11 years ago was happening again. Only now the fleets were already arriving. Saelyra opened a broad diplomatic channel and tried to transmit the recovered archive. Nothing left the ship. They are blocking us. Phelan checked the communication system. Orizon controls the relay space. Ahead, hundreds of navigation lights appeared around the ancient gate. 2 fleets approached from opposite sides, each believing the other had violated the boundary. Elias saw weapons. Systems powering up through passive sensors. No one had fired. Not yet. Saelyra turned to him. Get me close enough to broadcast directly. That puts us between both fleets. I know. Elias looked at her, then at the impossible wall of ships ahead. 11 years ago, he had flown away carrying civilians while his squadron stayed behind. Now every instinct told him to take Saelyra and run. His hands settled on the controls. Phelan, secure everyone. Saelyra strapped into the co-pilot seat. What are you doing? Elias pushed the engines to full power and aimed the Asterion directly at Orizon Gate. Making sure nobody gets to start this war without flying through me first. The Asterion accelerated toward the narrow darkness between 2 armed fleets, and Elias felt the ship become honest beneath his hands. No politics, no titles, just mass, distance, heat, and time. Saelyra worked beside him, trying to force a direct transmission through Orizon's interference while Commander Phelan relayed passive sensor data from behind them. Both formations are tightening, Phelan said. They think we are an attack craft. Good, Elias replied. Saelyra looked at him. Good. They are watching us instead of each other. Warning tones began sounding as targeting systems found the courier. Elias silenced the unnecessary alerts and kept only navigation audio. The old gate grew larger ahead, a dark ring nearly 2 miles across, surrounded by relay towers built into its outer frame. Somewhere inside that machinery, false orders were spreading faster than truth. I need 90 seconds within direct broadcast range, Saelyra said. You have 40. That is not enough. Then speak quickly. Elias rolled beneath a Valari cruiser as it moved to intercept. Another ship approached from the human side. He changed speed rather than direction, slipping through the closing space before either vessel could block him. No weapons followed. Nobody wanted to be first. That hesitation was the only shield they had. Then Orzin transmitted a priority command across the fleet channels. Thalen listened, face tightening. Both sides have been ordered to prepare immediate defensive action. Elias understood the wording. Defensive. A clean word that could make thousands of frightened people believe whatever happened next was justified. Saelyra. Almost there. The Asterian crossed within 5 miles of the gate. Her transmitter finally found a narrow path through the interference. She began sending Jonah's archive, but Orzin severed the connection after 3 seconds. It is rejecting everything without paired authorization. Elias looked at the shielded containers. Then give it what it wants. Saelyra understood. If we activate both crystals here, whoever controls Orzin could take command of the authorization pair. For a few seconds. And after that, Elias looked toward a maintenance passage running through the gate's outer structure. Too narrow for the pursuing cruisers. Barely wide enough for the Asterian. After that, you leave. Saelyra turned sharply. We leave. Elias opened the emergency escape craft remotely. The escape craft can carry you, Thalen, and our injured guest. No, Princess. No, Elias finally faced her. 18,000 people survived Kestrel because somebody stayed long enough to give them a way out. I spent 11 years thinking that meant I abandoned everyone else. I am done confusing survival with failure. Saelyra's expression changed, anger giving way to understanding. Then do not make the same choice for me. Before Elias could answer, Jonah's voice broke through on a narrow analog channel. She has a point, kid. Elias almost laughed despite himself. Your timing is terrible. Always was. Jonah transmitted an old Wraith squadron access sequence. Orzin accepted it. For the first time, the interference weakened. Saelyra activated both crystals. The gate began broadcasting the recovered records across every nearby frequency. Fleet formation slowed. Command channels filled with confused voices. Then another signal appeared, stronger than all the others. Saelyra's brother had arrived aboard the Valari Royal Command ship. His voice carried across the system, declaring the archive fraudulent and ordering Saelyra's immediate arrest. Elias looked toward the massive vessel emerging behind the Valari fleet. Saelyra stared at it in silence. Then she reached for the transmitter. Open every channel, she said. If my brother wants the galaxy to choose between us, then the galaxy is going to hear why. Saelyra opened every channel Orzin would allow, and for 1 suspended second the entire region seemed to listen. Human cruisers held position on one side of the gate. Valari warships waited on the other. Between them, the Asterian looked absurdly small, its engines running hot, its hull still carrying scars from the gas giant. Saelyra spoke without ceremony. She identified herself, confirmed that the authorization crystals were genuine, and stated that the recovered Vesper records were being transmitted without alteration. Then she addressed her brother directly. If I am lying, let the fleets examine the evidence. If you are telling the truth, you lose nothing by allowing them to listen. Elias glanced at her. Simple, clean, dangerous. Her brother answered immediately. He ordered Valari commanders to ignore the transmission and commanded the Royal Guard to seize the Asterian. Nothing moved. Saelyra leaned toward the transmitter. That was not evidence. Silence followed. Then a human destroyer acknowledged receipt of Jonah's archive. Another captain confirmed that the old command signatures matched sealed wartime records. A Valari cruiser reported the same. Doubt moved through the fleets faster than fear had. Elias watched targeting locks disappear one by one. Then Orzin fought back. The gate began flooding both sides with contradictory navigation instructions, emergency alerts, and false reports of hostile movement. Ships shifted uncertainly. Formation lines bent. It is trying to create panic, Thalen said. Elias studied the traffic pattern. No. Someone is trying to make one captain react. One frightened ship turning too sharply could be interpreted as an attack. One defensive response could trigger another. Elias pushed the Asterian directly into the center lane and activated its civilian collision beacon at maximum power. Every nearby vessel automatically received their position. "What are you doing?" Saelyra asked. "Giving them something they can all agree is real." The little courier became the fixed point between two nervous armadas. Elias reduced speed until they were nearly motionless. If either fleet advanced, it would have to visibly pass them first. Minutes stretched. Nothing did. Then Jonah's analog signal returned, carrying an old squadron identification code. A human cruiser answered. Then another. Across the Valari formation, 3 ships transmitted matching acknowledgement patterns. Elias stared at the incoming responses. These were not members of Wraith's squadron. They were captains who had been aboard the civilian transports at Kestrel Hollow. People he had guided out 11 years ago. One voice came through, older now. "Wraith, this is Meridian 7. We remember the corridor." Another followed. "Valari Transport Saelyra. We remember too." More ships began breaking from their assigned formations, not toward the enemy, but toward the Asterian. They positioned themselves around the courier with weapons inactive, forming a widening ring of refusal. Saelyra looked at Elias. "They came back for you." He shook his head. "No, they came back for what happened." Her brother ordered them to return to formation. Nobody obeyed. Then Commander Thalen received a priority royal transmission. He listened, and the color drained from his face. "Princess, the Palace Council has reviewed the archive." Saelyra stood perfectly still. "And your brother has been stripped of command pending investigation." Across the gate, the Royal Command ship powered down its weapons. One by one, hundreds of others followed. The war ended before it could begin. Elias released a breath he had been holding for 11 years. Then Jonah spoke privately into his headset. "You did it again, kid." Elias watched the ring of ships surrounding them. "No," he said softly. "This time, everybody stayed." 3 weeks later, the Asterian rested inside the Western Royal Hangar on Valera, surrounded by polished diplomatic cruisers that made the little courier look even more battered than it was. Morning light poured through the high crystal panels, turning Saelyra's turquoise skin silver at the edges. The air smelled of warm metal, hydraulic fluid, and fresh rain drifting through the open atmospheric shield. Elias lay beneath the starboard engine housing with both sleeves rolled above his elbows, tightening the stabilizer assembly that had complained since the gas giant. A pair of boots stopped beside his shoulder. "There are 6 royal engineers assigned to this hangar," Saelyra said. "None of them trust this ship. Smart people." Elias slid out and wiped grease from his hands. She was dressed simply, without ceremonial robes or guards. The Palace Council had cleared her name, suspended her brother from royal authority, and delivered the recovered Vesper records to independent human and Valari investigators. Ors and Gate had been disconnected from military networks. Jonah Mercer had finally emerged from 11 years of hiding to testify about the original conspiracy. Those matters belonged to governments now. Elias preferred engines. Saelyra held out a small case. He opened it and found a royal flight insignia resting on dark velvet. "No," he said. "You have not heard the offer." "Still no." "Commander of the royal flight." "Definitely no." She folded her arms. "You are remarkably difficult to reward. You paid me to fly. You flew between 2 fleets. That was not in the contract. Neither was saving my life repeatedly." Elias closed the case and returned it. The metal felt cool against his palm. "Keep the metal." Saelyra studied the scar around his wrist, no longer as a clue to something hidden, but as part of the man standing before her. "Everyone knows now," she said. Elias glanced toward the hangar entrance. Mechanics crossed the bright floor. Nobody stared. "Knows what?" "That the quiet cargo pilot I hired was the only surviving pilot of Wraith's squadron. That you guided more than 18,000 people out of Kestrel Hollow. That you disappeared instead of letting anyone turn you into a symbol." Elias picked up his wrench. People like symbols because symbols cannot argue with them. And what would Elias Vance argue? The hangar hummed around them. Somewhere above, rain tapped softly against the crystal roof. Elias looked at the Asterian. Fresh plating covered its damaged sections, but he had refused to polish away every scorch mark. Some things deserved repair. Others deserved remembering. "That I was never the hero they wanted," he said. "I was a pilot who happened to be there." Saelyra stepped closer to the ship and ran her fingertips across one rough seam in the repaired hull. That is why I trusted you. Elias looked at her. You did not trust me when you hired me. No, I hired you because you were quiet, qualified, and apparently incapable of being impressed by royalty. Reasonable standards. Her smile came slowly. I trusted you when you turned back for a man who had been chasing us. Elias set the wrench on the workbench. Saelyra reached into her coat and produced 2 flight passes. I have one final royal assignment. He narrowed his eyes. I already said no. This one has no fleet, no cipher, no diplomatic crisis, and no one is permitted to start a war. Suspiciously specific. The Asterian needs a test flight. I need a pilot. Elias glanced at the open cockpit, then toward the rain-bright sky beyond the atmospheric shield. Where are we going? Saelyra offered him the second pass. Somewhere that does not need a war hero. For several seconds, he listened only to cooling machinery and rain. Then he took the pass, opened the cockpit, and stepped aside so she could board first. An hour later, Saelyra became a blue jewel behind them while untouched stars spread across the windshield. Elias rested one hand lightly on the controls. For 11 years, every dark horizon had carried the shape of Vesper. Now Saelyra sat beside him, and the stars were simply stars again. He had survived the deadliest war in memory, but what made the princess choose him was the one thing war had never managed to take from him: his humanity.